Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
El tiempo para la verdad es patrocinado por la Clínica Dental Bernard Fialkoff DDS, con especialidades en implantes dentales, láser periodontal, cirugía cosmética. Visítanos en el 5603 de la 214 Street, Bayside, New York, con el teléfono 718-229-3838. Clínica Dental Bernard Fialkoff.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on, let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to welcome you back on the show. And tonight we have a show that's very important, not only for our country, but for our children. And that's because of a very dangerous drug called fentanyl. Fentanyl. What is fentanyl? And how many deaths is it causing? Where did it come from? And how is it that it's getting across the country? Well, tonight's show, we're very honored to have someone who actually is going to give us some answers and some stability, some direction on what to do so we can safeguard our children and our communities from this very dangerous drug. And her name is Karen Hadley. Buddha, if you put up Karen's pictures up on the screen for our viewers, and we're going to introduce Karen Hadley. There you go. There you see her with the Pope. And Karen is a renowned researcher of drugs, and writer, graduated from the University of California at Berkeley. And she's been investigating America's drug problem way back to 2006, when she had a career at the drug rehabilitation facility and program of Narconon Arrowhead. And there you see the symbol of Narconon International. Tremendous drug rehabilitation program. She was director of business development at Omnitronics and marketing director at Narconon Arrowhead, and went on to research the field of drug use and addiction for more than a decade, monitoring trends in manufacturing, trafficking, and the use of drugs. She's published more than 2 million words on drug addiction, recovery, and healthcare. And as a freelance writer, she's published on alternative healthcare, chiropractic, acupuncture, holistic medicine, and biological dentistry. And Buddha, if you bring her up live on the screen, I want to bid a warm welcome to Karen Hadley. Let's bring her up live. Welcome, Karen.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, thank you for accepting, because there's a lot that we have to tell our viewers. And so it's our pleasure. And engineer, if you put up Karen's slides up on the screen, I want to get right to it, because I've been horrified and very upset with what's going on. So what is, as he's getting the slides up on the screen, what is this thing fentanyl?
Fentanyl has been a medical drug for more than 60 years, but it was normally used for cancer pain and end-of-life pain because it was so powerful and so highly addicted. It had to be very strongly restricted from broad use.
And is it stronger than other pain relievers? How does it compare?
Well, painkillers are normally measured against the power of morphine. So they count morphine as the power of 1. And fentanyl is approximately 100 times stronger than morphine. So if a person has been receiving morphine medically, or if they get morphine illicitly, and then they get a substitute of fentanyl, it's very likely to kill them because it's 100 times stronger, and they're not used to that dosage of any opioid, any opiate-type painkiller.
Unbelievable. Now, I know you have some slides that you want us to show. So do you want us to keep the slides up for the viewers, or how do you want to do this?
Well, the 2 slides you just showed were perfect. One of them showed a fentanyl lozenge, which is administered so that a person can suck on it and get a very tiny dosage of fentanyl over a period of time. Say they have cancer and they have what they call breakthrough pain. They're on a painkiller. It's not dealing with the pain, so they suck on this lozenge of fentanyl. The other image that you showed was a fentanyl patch, which delivers the drug through the skin very slowly. And then there were some pills in that image that were very, very tiny dosage of fentanyl, just like, 100,000th of a gram of that drug.
Wow. Buddha, let's put her slides back up on the screen, because they're so important for the viewers to see and to understand everything she's going to say. And go to the next slide.
These are the medical forms of fentanyl from 1960 until about 2005. This was about this and an injectable liquid fentanyl that could be used in an anesthetic formula. It was about all there was on the market. So some medical personnel or orderly or somebody who had access to medicines in a hospital could divert some of these supplies to the illicit market. And a few people would overdose. Every year, a few people would overdose. But it was hard to get these drugs out of the hospital, out of the doctor's office. So the overdoses were always very low. Now that continued until there started to be illicitly manufactured fentanyl arrive in the United States. That's what changed everything.
Wow. Let's go to the next slide, Buddha. And
This
what
is
is
not
this
showing
here,
it very
Karen?
clearly. Well, this image, these are diagrams of the way the fentanyl atom or molecule is structured. You can see that all these different diagrams are very similar. All you do is move a molecule from one side to the other, or change the place some atom of nitrogen is attached, and you get a slightly different drug. The reason this diagram is being included is because when illicit fentanyl began to arrive in the country, all these different formulas of fentanyl, up to 100 different kinds of fentanyl, were what was being imported into the country illicitly. So fentanyl, when you're talking about fentanyl overdoses or a fentanyl drug problem, you're not actually talking about one drug, you're talking about 100 different drugs, which makes it very hard for law enforcement to chase down and arrest people, because one form of fentanyl may be illegal and another form of fentanyl may not be illegal. But you can take that image down now.
And why is it so easy to overdose on this fentanyl?
Because of the strength, because of the power of the drug. It is 30 to 50 times stronger than heroin. So I want to back up a little bit, and I want to talk about how the drug started making its way into the illicit drug supplies, so that people were being surprised by getting a batch of fentanyl. They would overdose and die. You could see if they were surprised by this drug, it could take their life. Can you take this image down for a little bit?
Sure. You like the next? Yeah.
Yeah, don't put the next one up yet. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, let's get the next
In
image,
2000
engineer.
No, don't put the next image up yet. I just want to tell a little bit of the story. That's fine. I want to tell the story about how it arrived in the country, and then we'll do some more images. So we got this very low level of overdose deaths. And then in 2005, all of a sudden we've got this big bump. And in Camden, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York City, and Maryland, all of a sudden there were 1,000 overdose deaths total. And people were freaking out about this. So they found a lab in Toluca, Mexico, which is near Mexico City, that was manufacturing an illicit form of fentanyl. It could have been any one of those formulas you just saw on that chart. The drug traffickers in Mexico were bringing that drug into the country, distributing it to the major East Coast cities, and people got this powerful drug. They expected heroin. It's 50 times stronger than what they're used to. Even if it's diluted, it's still going to be stronger than what they're used to. People began dying. That lab was shut down, and the overdoses all dropped to the level they were at before, just that little trickle of overdoses from the medical fentanyl that was being filched out of hospital pharmacies. Now, in 2013 was when our current catastrophe started. In 2013, chemical companies, pharmaceutical companies in Pakistan, India, and China began large-scale manufacturing of fentanyl. And it could have been any one of these formulas. Now, Pakistan and India kind of dropped out of the game, and China took it over. China began using package delivery services to get fentanyl to people who would order it off the internet. So anywhere in the United States, you've got people going to a website, ordering powdered fentanyl, getting it delivered from China, and then they take their pile of heroin and they mix it. They're just mixing this drug in, and they're not pharmacists and they don't have sophisticated equipment, so they get hot spots that are hotter with fentanyl. People getting that piece of the batch are going to die, and the people that get a batch from the other end of the pile are going to live, because they're just haphazardly mixing the fentanyl into their heroin. What it does, it means that they can more greatly dilute their heroin supplies, but their customers are still going to get an opiate kick out of their sales because of the fentanyl. The fentanyl gives it more kick. These guys are looking for a high, they're looking for that mellow, fuzzy feeling that they get. This diluted heroin may not do it. You add a little fentanyl to it, and all of a sudden your customers are going, man, I need some more of that stuff I got from you last week. Give me some more of that. So they become renowned for having this great product because they've got this fentanyl mixed in. So that was how it started. Does that make sense?
Wow. Wow. You know what's amazing is that it got shipped from China, because I know one time there was a book that I ordered and it didn't get to me because it was stopped. And there was another book that someone wanted from me that I tried to ship to another country, and it came back because it didn't get through. But yet somehow fentanyl is not important. It's okay to have it come into our country. That's amazing.
Well, some of these companies would say, look, order fentanyl from us, and if you lose your package, we'll send you another one. I mean, obviously they had so much of it, it meant nothing to them. So they would just replace the package, if any. You know, that was their sales promise, right? To get people to buy.
Amazing. Amazing. It's such a dangerous drug. And so is that basically then how America got set up to have the problem that we have nowadays?
Well, not exactly. Let's look at the next slide, and then we'll answer that question.
Okay, Buddha, let's put up the slide.
This shows you the comparative strengths of different kinds of opioid painkillers. Opioid just means that it's a kind of painkiller that is similar chemically to opium, or maybe it's derived from opium. So you've got hydrocodone and morphine being a power of 1 in this scale. Oxycodone, a very, very popular drug among people who are addicted to opioids, 5. Then you go down to fentanyl, 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. Then there's a type of fentanyl. One of these 100 types of fentanyl is a drug called carfentanil, and it is 10,000 to 100,000 times stronger than morphine.
And now I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what is this carfentanil? Why would you need something so tremendously higher in potency?
The primary use of carfentanil is to take down large animals. And when you see people out in the wilds of Africa and they've got to anesthetize a rhinoceros, they use carfentanil. Matter of fact, the brand name of carfentanil is Wild Nil. It like puts animals down. So the animal goes to sleep, they do whatever they've got to do with the animal, and then they give it, there's an antidote called naloxone. They give the animal the naloxone, the animal wakes up and runs off into the bushes. It does have very, very limited use other than that, but carfentanil is one of the drugs that's in the American drug supply that you could see how easy it would be to die from even the smallest dose
Oh,
of carfentanil.
unbelievable. And Buddha, if you put that back up, I want to put that back up for a second because I want to make a comment, because I looked at one of the drugs there called methadone, and I see how methadone has a higher potency than morphine, and somehow methadone is being used as a supposed that an addict has been rehabilitated, when we put them on methadone for life. And I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at it, I don't know if I'm wrong or not, Karen, because you're the investigator, but what kind of logic is it then that we're rehabilitating an addict with methadone when the methadone is worse than the morphine?
Well, look further down the scale for a moment, and you're going to see another drug there called buprenorphine, which is 40 times as strong as methadone, as morphine rather. Buprenorphine is the other drug that's given in treatment, in what they call treatment, along with methadone. They're either given methadone or they're given buprenorphine, just depending on which program they get enrolled in. Some of the materials and some of the people using these two drugs for a person who's trying to get off the streets, they're trying to get off drugs, and they say that you may just plan on taking drugs for the rest of your life. And the only reason that has to happen anywhere is because they don't have any other way to rehabilitate a person effectively. They put a person in a program, he gets out of the program, he goes back to drugs within 12 hours. When they put a person on one of these two drugs, they don't keep buying heroin or other street drugs. But the thing that keeps being overlooked is that they're still addicted to an opiate. They're still got the effects of it. They still get the illnesses associated with it, and they still get the mental effects of taking a drug every day.
It's unbelievable. I'm a doctor, and I can't get my wits around the logic. It's almost like the person was better off if he's addicted to the morphine than he is giving him the methadone. I mean, not that obviously I want to do that, but it just, the logic escapes me. So it's amazing. I'm glad you showed that. So let me ask you a simpler question. How could someone be putting fentanyl in kids' candy? My wife told me that the other day. She saw it on some different media outlets that fentanyl was being put in kids' candy. What is going on in our country?
That's not actually what happened. What happened was, well, much later in this whole chain of explaining this, I was going to explain how one of the developments were that drug traffickers began to buy pill presses and then stamp fentanyl into forms that look like prescription drugs. They look like legitimate prescription drugs, and we have an image we'll look at later for that. However, they didn't actually put fentanyl into children's candies. They did start creating what the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, is calling rainbow fentanyl. It's a pill that looks like something called an M30, which is a 30 milligram pill of oxycodone, which is a powerful painkiller. And they come in all different colors, which is not the way the pharmacists do it, but it's the way the drug traffickers are doing it. The DEA is guessing that the reason for this is to appeal to younger drug buyers. But they weren't being distributed to children, and they weren't being given out as Halloween candy.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes me feel a little better. But but so they were doing the colors to appeal to younger potential, buyers.
Right. It doesn't really make sense because they no longer look like legitimate pharmaceutical products, which was the reason that some of the kids would go to drug dealers and they'd go, listen, give me some M30s. This gives me a good high. But M30s are blue, and they're even called blues. And these pills are all different colors, so I'm not quite sure how they've made that connection mentally, but that's what they're doing and not what I'm doing.
Right. Wow. Okay. And now, I guess the question our viewers would have, because I have this question, so what's being done to stop this flow of fentanyl into our country?
Nothing. In 2017 and 2019, the Chinese government made promises that they would take action. In 2017, they banned 4 types of fentanyl. Now, there's like 100 different types of fentanyl. Wow, thank you. That was wonderful. In 2019, they banned all types of fentanyl that weren't being manufactured for legitimate pharmaceutical purposes. However, there's 5,000 pharmaceutical companies in this vast country called China. In 2019, only 15 companies that were making narcotics or controlled prescription drugs, something that would be abusable and addictive, only 15 of them had any inspections. So the other 4,985 were free to manufacture fentanyl if they want to. There are many people that are now questioning the motives of China toward the United States. And this is another area where some people are questioning what they could stop this if they want to, so why aren't they? Now, the Chinese hooked up very closely with the Mexican drug cartels. One thing that happens in this field, it's always shifting and changing, and if you want to be able to track the trends, you have to be prepared for another shift in a year or year and a half. So after China began shipping over these small packages to American buyers, they then hooked up with the Mexican drug cartels who already have drug labs. They already have drug traffickers and channels and cities on the border that they control. China began shipping container loads of fentanyl to Mexico. Then they began shipping container loads of what are called precursor chemicals. It's the chemicals you have to make fentanyl. So China didn't have to do this shipping themselves. They just sent everything to Mexico. Mexico brings it into the country as they have been doing for many decades, along with cocaine, methamphetamine, bales of marijuana, and so forth.
Very interesting, because the impact and the implications of a drug that's so potent is unfathomable to me. And, I have to relate a story to you. My own mother, who at the time was around, I think, 91, and the physician had put her on a fentanyl patch. She was a 91-year-old lady, and I came to visit her. It was during the hurricane that hit the Northeast. So the hurricane came at a great time because that night we had to stay, and she was walking around the living room, and I heard her in the middle of the night. I got up, I walked over to her, and she was walking in a circle because she was so delusionary from this patch. And I was able to speak to her, get her off the patch, and she was fine. And we got her off the patch, and we got her, feeling fine without the patch. And I thought it was just amazing that they had put a 91-year-old person on this tremendously powerful drug as a pain reliever, and that it was even marketed by the pharmaceutical companies or not restricted according to age, which I found amazing. you know, so I want to relate that story because it happened to my own house, and I saw how I was able to get my mother off of it. So what has been the result of this fentanyl in our country? What you know, in terms of all the different ramifications here?
Well, first of all, one of the effects of having so much fentanyl in the country is that it began to be found in other types of drugs. In other words, in cocaine, in methamphetamine, even in a couple of occasions in marijuana supplies. So you have a person, maybe they go out on the weekend and they party with cocaine. And then the drug dealer adds fentanyl to their cocaine supplies, and maybe they go out that weekend and they fatally overdose. So then you do an autopsy on this person, and they've got, they've got alcohol, they've got marijuana, they've got methamphetamine, which they were using to party, and then they've got a fatal dose of fentanyl. Very few people actually die with only one drug in their system. They only have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Right.
sometimes really a lot of drugs. I wanted to go back to something you asked earlier. You asked how we got into this situation. Now, you're probably familiar with the fact that in the mid-90s, medical doctors and some dentists began overprescribing opioid painkillers because they took the word of Purdue Pharma and all the other pharmaceutical companies that followed suit that opioids suddenly, magically, were no longer addictive. And they could begin to prescribe these for chronic pain, not just cancer pain and end-of-life pain. For many decades, medical doctors would not prescribe opioid painkillers unless they had to, because patients could easily become addicted. Well, Purdue Pharma's marketing department changed that, brainwashed people into believing that opioids were not particularly addictive, could be given freely, and then you've got a couple of million people who are addicted to painkillers. Now, these people need to, once they get addicted to painkillers that they've been prescribed, they have to keep taking them or they're going to get desperately sick from withdrawal symptoms. So, over time, the medical industry realized that they're getting addicted and they began to cut patients off. The CDC began to broadcast guidelines saying, don't give so many opioids. Well, now you've got people who are addicted and they can no longer get their killers, and they're going to go to the illicit market and they're going to try to get themselves heroin because they can't, they're desperately sick and they've got to have an opioid to stop the sickness.
Well, Karen, I want to let you go. We'd actually ran out of time, but I wanted you to at least get to a point on this. So basically, then that's how this happened then, and that's how we got so many addicts and then searching for a solution. So, I want to thank you for being on the show. And, I saw those two programs, that Narconon program and this Drug-Free World program. And I know, you had mentioned, so what are their, because I know they help people, then we have to really sign off, but what are the links for those two programs?
Well, the Renown program is a rehabilitation program that typically takes a person about 3 months,
but just,
4
I'm sorry,
months.
because we've ran out of time. So what are the links for those programs, real quickly?
Narconon is about 3 or 4 months, and the Drug-Free World program is a prevention program that doesn't have a duration. It just goes on all the time.
And what are the links for those sites? The internet links.
Oh, I'm sorry, the links, it's narconon.org, narconon.org,
Okay.
and Drug-Free World, no spaces.org to get prevention materials for anyone, the community, your children, anyone.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry I had to cut you off. It was so interesting. We ran over time because there was so much. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. And for those of you watching, let's do something about this. Let's wake up our society. Let's talk to our leaders. Let's get something done. And let's educate our youth. And let's help them with these programs that, Karen mentioned, the Narconon, the Drug-Free World. And thank you for being with us. And for those of you watching, let's see what we can do about this because we don't want this to continue. Thank you so much, Karen Hadley.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
And thank you for tuning in. See you on the next time of our Time for Truth show.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet